Part 29. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 288. This mission is actually a private job that Ryan took. The company didn't know about it. They may have thought that Ryan and I were on vacation. That bastard Ryan, he seems to have signed a separate agreement with his employer, and we took the money is a bit more than that of the Buffalo mercenary group, but because of this, we have to do more things than those of the Buffalo mercenaries. Isn't it the professional code of your profession to do things for money? Kaylan said. I know, I didn't mean it. I just regret a little bit why I listened to Ryan and came to this damn place to perform this damn mission. Damn Ryan, oh, he's dead, damn it, the mercenary said bitterly. It's useless for you to complain about this. It's better to tell us everything you know. Only if we find a way out can you return to the Ark alive. Although you may go to jail for a few years, or you may be directly exiled, that is better than dying in It's better here, Kaylan said. Continue to talk about what happened after you entered the water. After we put on the equipment, we started to dive, but Ryan, myself, and another Buffalo man, we didn't know where to go at all, so we just followed the two exiles. Let me think about it. I should have swam to the southwest for about 100 meters. As for the depth, I remember checking the depth gauge halfway and it was 37 meters. Then I dived some distance further, but it won't be more than 50 meters deep. He took a breath and continued, at that location, there was a closed stone door on the rock wall, but the leading exile just fumbled on the stone door, and the door opened. Then we walked along the path behind the door. I can't remember how far I walked as I walked further into the passage. At that time, my consciousness seemed to be in a trance, until I surfaced. Trance, Kaylan repeated the word. As someone who has personally experienced those nightmares, he naturally understands why the mercenary's consciousness is in a trance. Obviously, this is also related to mental attacks, and this should be a relic. A defensive method. But the problem is that after the mercenary was mentally attacked, it is difficult to say whether the things he saw were real or illusory. That cave is very big, almost as big as here, the mercenary said, but there is no water in it, and the location should be higher than the lake, because after we surfaced, we still walked a long flight of stone steps. Go into that cave. Kaylan looked toward the southwest, but he could only see a stone wall covered with fluorescent fungi. As for the stone gates, passages, and steps mentioned by the mercenaries, he could only rely on his imagination to complete them. There are complex architectural structures inside the mountain, which they already knew before coming to the Tiankang. It was for this reason that Kaylan felt that it was a real one when he was in the 9 stone chambers. World, after all, with the technology of Alpha civilization, it is easy to build such a mechanism. He subconsciously associated the 9 stone chambers with the mechanical structures found in the ice, completely unaware that they were just the illusory dream world. The shape of the cave, how can I put it, is very similar, very much like a big funnel. The mercenary said. Funnel? You mean, similar to a stepped auditorium? It's lower in the middle and higher around it. Kaylan tried to describe the appearance of the cave he imagined. Yes, yes. That's what it looks like. I originally wanted to say a staircase auditorium, but I didn't think of the word for a while, so I used a funnel to describe it. The mercenary nodded repeatedly. At the lowest point in the center of the cave, there is a platform, and the jar is placed on the platform. By the way, the platform is very regular, and there are some obvious cutting marks on the edges. It seems that it is not naturally formed. Of course it's not a natural formation, the Hound couldn't help but interjected. In my opinion, this underground lake and this seemingly natural erosion cave are all the work of the Alpha people. This area does not belong to karst landform. How could such a large volume of natural water appear inside the mountain? What is karst landform? The mercenary asked after being stunned. Unlike relic hunters who need to master a lot of knowledge and various special skills, The entry requirements for mercenaries are extremely low. To put it a bit exaggerated, anyone who can pull a trigger can become a mercenary. There is no such thing as an entry examination in this industry, and the quality of employees is also uneven. And like this guy in front of you, obviously I have almost forgotten all the things taught in compulsory education in ARC. Karst landform refers to the general term for surface and underground forms formed by soluble rocks eroded by water. It mainly refers to caves, underground rivers and dark lakes. Karst landforms are generally located in areas with higher temperatures and abundant flowing water resources. The geological composition is dominated by calcium carbonate rock layers, and the area where this glacier is located is called periglacial landform, or permafrost landform, although ice and snow can also erode rocks. The eroded appearance is still very different from karst landform. Lan explained. Moreover, the most critical point is that fresh water is formed after the melting of glaciers, and this is a saltwater lake. That's wrong. I remember I accidentally choked on a sip of water in that passage. It was fresh water, not salty, the mercenary said in shock. Then you have another taste. The hound took a coat that was laid on the stone and squeezed the mercenary's head hard. The water squeezed out immediately dripped on the mercenary's face, and the mercenary stuck out his tongue. I went to lick it and immediately spit it out with a grimace. It's really weird. You've been staying by the lake for so long, and you don't even know whether the lake is salty or light, the hound complained. No, old dog, you can't blame him. Lan seemed to have thought of something, stretched out his hand and patted the hound's leg, indicating him to sit down first. He just said, before walking through that passage, symptoms of trance occurred. You mean, he was also in a dream at that time? So the lake water he tasted was light? Doesn't that mean that the funnel cave is also an illusion and does not exist at all? Maybe the cave is an illusion, and the jar is real. After all, the people who stayed on the shore were not mentally attacked. Lan analyzed. We can try to change our thinking. Is there a possibility that the place where the jar is located can only be reached while half asleep? Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 289. No way. Hound opened his mouth and said with a look of astonishment, isn't this too mysterious? But in the next second, a wry smile appeared on the corner of the hound's mouth. But compared with the things we have experienced, it is nothing to be surprised about. You said the jar was placed on the stone platform, and then what? You went and took the jar away, Lan asked the mercenary. No. The jar is not placed directly on the stone platform. There is a base underneath it, the mercenary said. The guy who led the way told us that the base is actually a safety mechanism. If we forcibly dismantle the jar, when it comes down, the device inside the base will break the can and release the contents. What's in the jar? The hound asked following his words, but before the mercenary could answer, his expression suddenly changed. You said the contents would escape if the jar was broken, then now? Aren't the things already out? The collapsed passage can kill even people, but it can't break a glass jar? How dare you go back to find the jar? The jar should not be broken. The mercenary shook his head repeatedly. Although it is made of glass, it seems to be a very special kind of glass. It is stronger than the armor plate on the tank. The full power of the 10mm caliber, when I hit it, there wasn't even a trace. As for what's inside, I really don't know. The liquid in the jar is very turbid, like a vat of ink, and you can't see what's inside at all. You are really not afraid of death. You know it will be a big trouble if the contents inside escape, but you dare to shoot at the can, said the hound. It was a stray bullet. The stray bullet accidentally hit the can. If Ryan hadn't told me about it, I wouldn't have noticed it at all, the mercenary replied. Stray bullet? There was a fight in the cave? Is this the accident you mentioned before? Lan asked with a frown. Logically speaking, since the mercenary team did not suffer any casualties before withdrawing from the cave, it means that the intensity of the battle was not too high. However, If the intensity of the fighting was not too high, why would this accident cause them to delay their planned mission? What about evacuation time? We did have a firefight in the cave, but the accident I am talking about is not referring to this incident. Then let's talk about the firefight first. Who are your enemies? Aboriginal creatures? Or some, more bizarre monsters? I don't know what it is. The mercenary muttered. When we climbed to the platform and were about to get the can off, a lot of them came out from nowhere around the platform. He frowned, as if he was constipated. Obviously, for a while, this mercenary couldn't find a suitable adjective for what they encountered in his poor vocabulary. To describe. How do I put it? It's a bit like minced meat. No. It should be more accurate to say minced meat. It's the kind of minced meat that is very finely chopped with a blender when making meatballs in Chinese restaurants. They are also its light pink, giving people a very sticky feeling, a bit like mud mixed with a lot of water. These muds gush out from under the platform, and soon fill the ditch that is more than 1 meter deep around the platform. Filled up, after they were level with the height of the platform, they began to crawl towards the platform. Kaylan, could it be that thing? The hound slowly rubbed the stubble on his chin and said to Kaylan in an extremely fearful tone. Kaylan knew what the hounds were referring to, those red meatworms on Leviathan. The way they moved was indeed somewhat similar to the meatworms mentioned by the mercenary. But Kaylan shook his head and said, it shouldn't be, although those bugs look like a red tide from a distance. If you look closely, you can still distinguish the individual outlines. These mercenaries are not far away from the flesh. It's not that far. Besides, if it were those bugs, they would have been eaten long ago. Kaylan glanced at the mercenary lying on the ground and said, I didn't ask you to stop, so you continue talking. Oh, after those pieces of meat came up, Ryan and I's first reaction was to shoot, but the bullets were no different from hitting the soil. Not just bullets, even flames, it has no effect on them. I watched Ryan throw an incendiary bomb into the meat, but the flames were extinguished as soon as they rose, and the body of the incendiary bomb was also wrapped in the meat. I quickly emptied the bullets in the magazine. Just when I was about to step back and reload, an exile suddenly grabbed my shoulder. He asked everyone not to step back and followed him. Do it like. What do you do like him? He took out a dagger and cut himself on his arm, letting the blood drip on the ground. Oddly enough, the minced meat stopped approaching after smelling the smell of blood. A very slender tentacle stretched out from their bodies, touched the blood dripping from the person, and then retreated. He yelled at us, if you don't want to be swallowed, use your own blood as a sacrifice. They will not attack you after swallowing the blood. To be honest, I didn't believe it at first, but Ryan believed it, and after he did it, the meaty meat really stopped crawling towards him. The mercenary said, stretching out a part of his wrist with a healed knife mark on it, I did the same. The exile did not lie to us. After sucking the blood we dripped, these fleshy pulps, he retreated under the platform and disappeared not long after. In my impression, there is indeed an indigenous creature that is very similar to the meat you mentioned, but some of its characteristics are completely opposite. Kaylan pondered. What is it? The hound couldn't help but ask. There is a special creature called Zyrang. There is no sample, and it is impossible to determine whether it is an independent individual or a group. It cannot be classified into the existing biological classification system. It is only found on Alpha Planet. Sightings have been recorded in several dry valleys near the South Pole. Kaylan paused, and a trace of doubt flashed between his eyebrows. However, according to the existing information, 11 soil is a gray and white mud-like creature that likes to live in very dry areas, and with you the exact opposite of the meat in the mouth is that 11 soil will become very aggressive after coming into contact with human blood. Half of the people in the exploration team who first witnessed 11 soil died because of this. One sucked a small amount of blood and then retreated, but the other started killing after smelling the smell of blood. Even if the appearance of these two creatures is similar, it is difficult to say that they belong to the same creature. Could it be a closely related species? Or, a subspecies, a mutant species, or something like that, the Hound guessed. It's possible. Moreover, I think these things have been modified and domesticated by the Alpha people, but the only thing I can't figure out is why they react to human blood. Even if these minced meats are indeed soil modified by the Alphas, then after they suck the blood of alien species like humans, their most normal reaction should be to expel these invaders from the ruins. That's right, instead of retreating obediently like a pet fed by its owner. This is so confusing. After the meat paste disappeared, we started to work. The two exiles asked us to hold the jar with our hands, and they themselves took out a dozen metal rods as thick as fingers and with strange patterns engraved on them. After a while, they asked us to hold the jar hard, and then inserted the metal rods into the base under the jar one by one, just like inserting a key. "Those metal rods, are they always with them?" Kaylan asked. The mercenary nodded, while Leighton on the side shook his head. "I searched the corpses of those exiles at least 3 or 4 times. If there were such things, I would have discovered them long ago. I remember that after they inserted the metal rod, they didn't take it out again," the mercenary said. "Within 3 seconds of inserting the metal rod, the jar bounced off the base. Fortunately we were prepared so the can didn't roll off the platform. But, the accident happened at this time," the mercenary continued. "A lot of water came out of the base, and the water flow was very fast. No, it should be said that it was very strong, like a high-pressure water cannon used for riot control." Ryan and one of the exiles were instantly washed off the platform by the current, while another mercenary and I were holding onto the jar, but we couldn't hold on for even a second before falling down together with the jar. Fortunately, the water level below was already more than 1 meter deep at that time. The mercenary's face showed a look of recollection. "The situation was chaotic at that time, and I can't remember exactly what happened. Anyway, by the time we returned here with the can, it was already more than an hour beyond the scheduled evacuation time. Okay, now I have told you everything I know, then, can you give me that? Although I'm not very satisfied, I'm not a very harsh person either," Kaylan said, placing the syringe containing the morphine solution on the ground. The mercenary quickly struggled and turned around, putting the syringe on the ground. He held the syringe in his hand, pulled off the protective cover with his teeth, and directly inserted the needle into the subcutaneous tissue on the inside of his arm. Kaylan no longer paid attention to the addict who only had half a life left. Instead, he walked to the other side with Hound and others and began to discuss the next plan of action. What to do now? The secret passage these guys came in is completely blocked, and there is no other way here. We can't search the entire bottom of the lake, right? Even if we seize those people's diving equipment and oxygen, the problem has been solved, but who knows what other monsters there are under the lake," the Hound said very fast. "We have solved the big octopus that can speak human language, but what are we going to do with those damn piranhas? We can't stay at the bottom of the lake for a long time. Perhaps we can go to the cave that the mercenary mentioned. Maybe we can find something," Qin Zhao suggested. Anyway, those meat pastes don't seem to be a threat to us." "Little sister, I said you are still too young." Hound glanced at Qin Zhao and coughed in a mature manner. "If you believe what others say, you will be tricked to death sooner or later. That guy, he was our enemy not long ago. We killed his brother and almost killed him too, then Kaylan tortured him to extract a confession, causing this guy not only to gain from this mission. If everything goes to zero, there is a high chance that he will be thrown into the wasteland to feed the indigenous creatures in the future. Do you think this guy can stop hating us?" Ah! Qin Zhao was speechless when the Hound said this, and his fair cheeks suddenly turned red. The reason why he didn't show any hatred was because he was afraid, but if he was given a chance to trap us all here, what do you think he would do? "But if we die, he can't go out alone," Qin Zhao said in a very thin voice. That's not necessarily the case. People in this business will more or less keep some trump cards, and now we can also verify whether what he said is true or false. Let me give you an analogy. If the number of people in their team is far away, there were more than a dozen people, and more than half of them died in the cave, killed by the meat. And he was one of the few who escaped death. Now, he told us, the meat paste that killed most of them is completely harmless and will recede after just sucking a few drops of blood. They are as well behaved as pet dogs raised by humans. Haha. The hound sneered twice. If possible, I would like to throw him into the cave first and try to see whether those so-called meat can eat people. Let's do this. Kaylan was silent for a long time and finally said, let's rest here for a while. Anyway, this place should be safe for the time being, and the supplies carried by the mercenaries are enough for us to last for a week. I suggest waiting until Ivan and Akira Asano will take further action after they wake up. This is a good suggestion. I support it with both hands. Layton nodded. Akira Asano is our strongest combatant. With him here, we will be more confident when we run into some monsters, and Dr. Ivan is well informed. P.S. The prototype of the Antarctic Dry Valleys is the Antarctic Dry Valleys on the real Earth. It is the only area in Antarctica not covered by ice and snow, and the inspiration of Zyrang comes from Spirit Cage, the time of private goods. I am so blown away by the special episode of Spirit Cage, Grandma by Yakui. Please give me a cup. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 290. Kaylan and the others stayed on the shore of the underground lake for 2 full days. The seriously injured mercenary died of complications caused by wound infection on the first night, while Ivan and Akira Asano did not wake up until noon of the next day. Similar to Ian's initial guess, Ivan dreamed that he was completely swallowed by the seed of corrosion and turned into an inhuman monster, massacring uncontrollably on the Ark, which scared him the most. What's strange is that although his self-awareness still remains in his body, it has been assimilated by the violent and murderous character of the corrosion seed. He is completely unable to contain this impulse, so much so that after waking up from the dream, his mental state is still in a very unstable state. I can't believe it, that's my own idea. I want to kill people. No, not kill, but eat. Ivan said in a trembling voice. Behind him his clothes were completely soaked with sweat, his facial muscles were twitching involuntarily, and his desperate and painful eyes would be difficult to erase from his mind once he looked at her once. Doctor, cheer up, that's just a dream, that's just a dream. Hound grabbed Ivan's shoulders, pulled his body over, and shook him hard a few times. You just had a nightmare, you didn't even. It's not a monster. No. You don't know that feeling. Ivan said. His expression was very strange, making it impossible to tell whether he was crying or laughing. That is my own will, and it is my subconscious mind, the hidden desire. I obviously didn't lose control of my limbs, but I didn't want to stop my violence. Those flesh and blood tempted me. I killed people and then ate their flesh. I didn't feel sick or afraid. But it is filled with a strange pleasure. This pleasure urges me to hunt more. He continued, I don't know if I am still a human being, maybe I have become a monster. Okay. Kaylan stood up and interrupted Ivan. Eating is a human instinct. There is no problem with it. But, Kaylan turned around and walked away. When he came back, he had a piece of stale meat in his hand with a lot of dark brown coagulated plasma on it. Without saying a word, he walked directly in front of Ivan and roughly stuffed the piece of meat into Ivan's mouth. This is, what? Meat just cut from a dead person, Kaylan replied calmly. Ouch, vomit. After hearing Ian's answer, Ivan immediately spat out the contents of his mouth, then knelt on the ground and retched. When his voice became hoarse from vomiting, Kaylan handed over a pot of water and said, "Rinse your mouth." Ivan originally wanted to say something, but in the end he swallowed all those words. As a result, he took a big sip from the water bottle, rinsed it vigorously a few times, and then spit out the liquid mixed with filth on the ground. He also said that he wanted to eat people, but he couldn't even swallow a piece of dead human flesh. Ivan was shocked, raised his head, and looked at Kaylan in surprise. "Now, do you still think you are a monster?" Kaylan looked at him with a half smile and asked. "Thank you." Ivan was silent for a few seconds, raised the back of his hand and wiped the water stains from the corners of his mouth. Although he looked very embarrassed, his expression was much more normal than before, and his eyes had regained their original calmness. "Kaylan really has you." Hound smacked his lips and said, "Tisk, I can't think of such a way. From another perspective, Ivan, the dream you experienced has no authenticity at all. Human beings are just containers for the seeds of erosion." Kaylan said, "When the seeds of erosion enter a period of rapid change, after the core appears, it has independent consciousness. Human beings, as a container, are just a shell that provides nourishment to it." There is a very classic science fiction movie, Alien. You have always seen it. Don't you think that the monsters that break out from the human body are transformed by that human being? Kaylan glanced at Ivan, continued, "Everything that appears in the dream world comes from your imagination. You think that human self-consciousness can be attached to the mature erosion seeds, so you feel that you have become a monster, but in reality yes, you would have been dead by then. My imagination, comes from my imagination." Ivan repeated the sentence softly. "You think that monsters will kill humans wantonly, so when your consciousness is attached to the monster, you will mistakenly think that you are killing. You think that you still maintain control of your body, but in fact, you are not. Can't you control anything?" Ian's tone softened slightly. "This is just a dream, it's no big deal. When I was playing a certain strategy game, I would always execute species, anti-harmony, and clan, anti-harmony. What about the policy of extermination, prevention of harmony, and even processed all of a certain species into instant cans? In reality, I haven't turned into a murderous demon without batting an eyelid." "I understand." Ivan nodded and said to everyone, "I'm fine. I'm sorry for making everyone worry. What's there to apologize for? It's a good thing to wake up." The hound patted Ivan's back hard, but because he accidentally pulled the newly bandaged wound under his ribs, he immediately frowned. "No taking painkillers, it really hurts, but just now, doctor, you really almost scared me. I thought you were going crazy. Old dog, I suggest you sit peacefully. It's better to lie down. Although I helped you reattach your broken bone, this position cannot be fixed with a plaster. If it takes a long time to heal, if it's crooked, you have to break it off and reconnect it again, if it accidentally gets inserted into the internal organs." Don't scare me." The hound's eyes suddenly widened. Okay, I won't move around anymore, okay. If you have a rib fracture, you can use a chest strap for external fixation. You can't do strenuous exercise for about a week. But if the number of broken bones is large, you need to put a stent in the body for internal fixation through surgery," Ivan said, and compared with Kaylan, who is a fill-in, he is the full-time doctor in the team. "Not many, only 2 were broken, but the soft tissue contusion was relatively serious," Kaylan said. "Then I can help you make a simple chest strap. Just find some elastic fabric and some bandages," Ivan said. "That's the best," Hound said quickly. "Kaylan likes to scare me so much that I don't even dare to move." Asano Akira woke up half an hour later than Ivan, but compared to Ivan, he seemed much calmer. "Kaylan, are you awake?" Asano Akira: "Yeah." "Kaylan, did you have a nightmare?" Akira Asano: "Well, dream that I don't really like, but I don't know if it's a nightmare." Kaylan: "What did you dream about?" Akira Asano: I returned to the experimental base and experienced it again. Kaylan, then what? Did you go on a killing spree, knocking out everyone else? Or saw some indescribable monster, stepped on a hole in the ark, or something like that? Akira Asano shook his head and said, no, everything is exactly the same as before. I am still the last person, and everyone who participated in the experiment is much better than me. He paused and continued, but they were all dead or crazy, and I was the only one who survived. I actually always knew it was a dream. Asano Akira's voice showed no emotion at all, but Kaylan heard a hint of reluctance, but at least, at that time, I could still see with my eyes. Thing. Do you regret it? Kaylan couldn't help but ask, participated in that kind of experiment. I have no chance to regret, and regret is useless, Asano Akira replied. Indeed, regret is the most useless thing in the world, so even if I do something wrong, I will only reflect on it instead of regretting it, Kaylan said with emotion. Only mediocre people waste time wasted on regrets. Hey, what are you talking about? Why don't you think about where to have a big meal after you go out? Don't you Chinese have an old saying, food is the first thing for the people? Filling the stomach is the most important thing, the hound chewed while eating the compressed dry food that looked like a bar of soap. He said, I'm really fed up with this kind of pig food. It's either bland or tasteless, or it's salty as hell, and it also smells like synthetic grease. Then what do you want to eat? Kaylan joked, would you like me to cut another piece of meat from that guy and let you, old dog, have a taste? Damn it, I'm just nicknamed Hound, and I'm not really a hound. Stop mentioning such disgusting things. Hound waved his hands repeatedly. Hey, to be honest, I've always wanted to eat Japanese food. Yes, I have heard that there are quite a few very good restaurants in the East 9th District, such as sushi, tempura, teppanyaki, and so on. It is a pity that those restaurants have turned into fireworks along with the entire East 9th District module. As he spoke, the Hound suddenly turned his head and looked at Asano Akira. By the way, Asano, you must know where the Japanese food is delicious, right? Can you recommend some? I've never eaten Japanese food, Asano Akira replied. Isn't it? Hound showed a look of astonishment. You are a Japanese, and you have never eaten Japanese cuisine? Never, Akira Asano said. When I was a child, every meal I ate was the standard nutritious meal for ARC residents. After the compulsory education period, I joined the army and started eating in the canteen of the military camp. Oh, and there are also execution standard military rations distributed during missions. Asano Akira's standard nutritional meal for ARC residents is as the name suggests. Its only function is to provide the residents on the ARC with all kinds of nutrients enough to maintain good health. As for the taste and texture of the food, it has never been included in it. Within the scope of consideration, this kind of food is provided free of charge to every ARC resident in the compulsory education stage. Of course, those who don't like to eat can give up receiving it and spend their credits to buy other food. Kaylan has also eaten this standard nutritious meal for a while. The outer packaging is a sealed plastic bag, and inside is a bag of something like flour. It is mixed with hot water into a paste and eaten. It also comes with a few add seasonings to make the batter taste less overwhelming. In addition, there are several oral tablets to supplement various vitamins and trace elements not found in the batter. This kind of food is probably only slightly better than the cockroach protein blocks that big consortiums distribute to minors. Even the compressed dry food that hunting dogs are eating now is not as good as it. No one would be willing to eat this kind of thing if it wasn't to fill their stomachs. You were also born in the Human Training Center, Kaylan asked subconsciously. Only children with this kind of background can have such a clean account that they don't even have a single credit point. However, any child from a family, no matter how poor their financial conditions are, well, I won't eat this stuff every time. No, I have parents, but they were exiled when I was very young. As for the reason for the exile, I don't know, Asano Akira said. His tone was as cold as if he was talking about two people who had nothing to do with him. People, I signed an agreement with some people. After completing compulsory education, I must obey the contents of the agreement and join that army. Otherwise, I will be exiled to the wilderness like my parents. So that's what it is. Hound muttered, the things adults commit are also implicated in children who don't understand anything, and they force children to sign such an agreement. Those guys really make our soldiers look bad. Throw it away. Actually, there's nothing delicious about Japanese cuisine. Most of it is just a gimmick. You can make a cooking god just by cooking. It's funny when you think about it. Kaylan changed the subject calmly. That's right, Ivan, do you have any suggestions? I don't care, Ivan waved his hand, as long as you have wine, it's fine. I think roasting a whole lamb is good, Zwilajito said, but the problem is that it's hard to get a whole lamb on the ark. I've only eaten it once since I was a child. How about we go eat hot pot? Qin Zhao suddenly stood up. Have you heard of Sichuan hot pot? It was very famous in the old era. I know a very good store, and the price is not expensive. You can choose real meat or synthetic protein meat according to your own conditions, and it's really delicious when paired with the boss's special hot sauce. Sichuan hot pot, Kaylan was stunned for a moment. Although he had heard of it, he had never eaten it. There were not many Chinese in the area where he lived, and there were only 1 or 2 restaurants with Chinese characteristics. I think you can try it. Is it spicy? It's spicy. I like spicy food, Zwilajito said, clapping his hands. Hot pot, I know, it's the kind of method where you put the ingredients in a pot and cook them, then take them out and eat them with sauce, right? I've wanted to try it for a long time. In fact, besides Japanese cuisine, I'm my second favorite. The only alternative is hot pot, shouted the hound. Okay, it's settled, we'll have hot pot after we go out, Kaylan said. The chatting should be over. Everyone, get ready. We're going to start working. P.S. Some readers have been saying that the pace is fast and makes me feel tired while reading recently. I have deliberately slowed down the pace. Do you think the content is a bit watery? Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 291. The dry food that Kaylan and the others carried plus the supplies they scavenged from the mercenaries were enough to last the 7 of them for about 7 days. As for drinking water, after filtering and purifying the water in the saltwater lake, it could barely meet the minimum drinking standard. In other words, after deducting the 2 days that have passed, they still have 5 days. If they cannot find a way to leave the ruins within these 5 days, they will have to eat. The hound turned his head and looked at the piles of mercenary corpses in the distance, trying his best to ignore the rotten smell wafting in the air. To be honest, if he really had to, he would rather eat under the lake. That big octopus. I hope those piranhas haven't eaten all the big octopus yet. The corpses of the exiles were thrown into the lake to feed the fish in order to prevent some strange things from parasitizing in their bodies. As for the corpses of these mercenaries, the hounds didn't know why Kaylan kept them. This guy couldn't possibly. Do you really plan to use the dead as emergency food reserves? Kaylan, what do you plan to do with those corpses? The hound couldn't help but ask. The smell is so bad, my nose really can't stand it. Be a bait, Kaylan replied immediately, to lure away those piranhas. As bait? Are you planning to go into the water again? Are you trying to go to the cave that the mercenary mentioned? The hound frowned. I always felt that that guy didn't tell the truth. Know what's in that cave? But in the past 2 days, we have searched everything above the water, and we have not found any exit. And the secret passage has been completely blocked. The cave is our last chance, Layton, he said, pointing to the corpses in his voice. Even if that guy is lying, at least they have been to that place and came out alive. Since they can come out, then it shouldn't be a problem for us. Are you stupid? Have you never thought that those brats might trigger the hidden mechanism of the ruins after taking out the jar? Do you think that the cave will still be the same as before they entered? That look. Hound's words immediately choked Layton. What he said was not wrong. When the ruins mechanism is activated, even places that were originally judged to be safe areas will be instantly filled with traps. First of all, the first batch and the second batch of people entering it will enjoy completely different treatment, let alone the distance. This is the case with the nearby glacier ruins. They came out of the core area alive, but the subsequent exploration teams were completely buried under gravel and ice. Let's do this, Kaylan said. Me, Asano, Akira and Layton, the three of us are currently the most capable people in the team. The three of us will explore the cave, while the others will stay behind. Stand by on the shore. In this case, even if an accident occurs, the entire army will not be wiped out. I don't agree. We have to go together. There's no reason for us to risk our lives by watching you from the shore, Hound objected. Now is not the time to be impulsive, Kaylan said in a very calm tone. Old dog, you are injured. If we take you with us, you can only be regarded as a burden. If something unexpected happens, we will still have to share some of it. I will use my energy to take care of you, or, if we decide to retreat and you fall behind, do you think we should risk the team being wiped out to rescue you? But Hound still wanted to argue, but found that Kaylan was not wrong. In this situation, not only him, but also Yvonne and Qin Zhao can be regarded as burdens. As for Zhou, like the picture is barely on the passing line. Their abilities are of no use underwater, and bringing them along will only make the team extremely bloated. A three-person team is the best choice. The smaller the size, the higher the flexibility in operations. Even if we encounter a monster, we can make the decision to fight or escape immediately, Kaylan said. Okay, the Hound finally nodded. Be careful and don't show off. If you can't, just run away. Saving your life is the most important thing. Don't worry, I will definitely die later than you. As soon as Layton finished speaking, before the Hound made a move, Kaylan already kicked him on the butt. I have never seen anyone set a death flag on themselves like this. You are still the first, Kaylan complained. Damn, the old dog always says that I have a crow's mouth, so isn't it true that I am just as good as a negative? Layton rubbed his butt and said with a smile. Where are you, Asano? You just woke up, are you in good health? Kaylan looked at Asano Akira and asked. I have no problem, Asano Akira said. The main reason why Kaylan made this decision was because of the return of Asano Akira. This is a combat force so powerful that it is almost unreasonable. This taciturn guy cannot be measured by conventional human standards at all, even if Kaylan, who has the ability to stop time, is by no means a match for Akira Asano. Even if he could clearly see the trajectory of Asano Akira's sword, he couldn't avoid the wind-like attack. What's more, Asano Akira also has explosive moves that can overdraw his own mental power, and he can kill him in an instant. Drop the powerful sea anemone head. In the dark and deep underwater environment, Asano Akira's only disadvantage, blindness, can almost be ignored. Even people with normal vision have very limited vision with the help of lights. If the lights are lost, they will also have to reach out. No fingers visible. But Asano Akira is different. In addition to vision, his other senses are much more sensitive than ordinary people. The sound transmitted through the water body, the subtle fluctuations and undercurrents in the water, all of these can provide him with enough information. For him who has adapted to the darkness, the strength he can exert in this environment is far beyond that of people like Kaylan who use their eyes as their main receptors. As for Layton, Kaylan chose him for even simpler reasons: propellers that can move quickly underwater, micro-rockets that can be used as torpedoes and chainsaws, and anchors that can be used as both tools and weapons. Wait, to sum it up, it can be accurately summarized in 6 words: the perfect tool man. The three of them put on the diving equipment brought by the mercenaries. In addition to diving suits and scuba, the mercenaries were also equipped with several harpoon guns. Although the harpoon gun is not as good as professional underwater weapons, it is cheaper. An alloy harpoon only costs less than 100 points, which is about the same as one bullet of the Shark Hunter underwater machine gun. It would be really weird if all these mercenaries were equipped with Shark Hunters and Vortex torpedoes. Even for the top Relic Hunters, such expensive and cutting-edge equipment is still a huge burden. In order to obtain these things, in addition to enough credits, connections and channels are also indispensable. A single-shot harpoon gun, a one-time consumable, its power is okay, but its hit rate is really poor, Layton commented. He did not hold a harpoon gun himself. He already had enough equipment. On the contrary, Kaylan had 6 harpoons inserted behind his back. From a distance, he looked like an old general on the stage of the old era. You just said that I set up a flag, but you have planted a lot of flags behind your back, Layton couldn't help but complain. Wouldn't it be equivalent to pulling out the flag if we shoot them all later, Kaylan said, then picked up 2 more submachine guns and a dozen magazines and stuffed them into his backpack. Although the mercenary said that the cave had been filled with seawater, he also said that the relative position of the cave was higher than the water surface of the saltwater lake. If the cave was not completely closed, then under the action of gravity, the water level would eventually fall back to the level of the lake. This is like holding a cup filled with water upside down on the surface of the water. Due to the atmospheric pressure, the water in the cup will not flow out, but if a small hole is punched in the bottom of the cup, the situation is completely different. Therefore, it is still necessary to carry some weapons used on land. The mercenaries also had 2 inflatable kayaks in their equipment. Kaylan and the other 3 took one of them to the connection between the cave and the underground lake, while Hound and the others carried the corpses left behind to the underground lake. The other end. They would throw the rotting corpses into the lake and try to lure the piranhas to the other end of the lake. Kaylan and the others could take this opportunity to dive directly. 30 minutes later. Kaylan sat on the edge of the kayak, glanced at his watch, and said, 10 minutes have passed since the scheduled time to release the bait. All the piranhas in the lake should have been attracted. It's our turn to take action. Understood. Layton gave Kaylan a thumbs up, jumped into the water first, and dived quickly. Kaylan and Asano Akira then put on scuba diving, leaned back, and dived headfirst into the lake. Testing communication, Kaylan said in the short-distance communication channel. 13 meters away from you, the communication quality is good and there is no interference, Layton replied from below. To be honest, these mercenaries really gave us a big gift. Without these equipment, we probably can only. I stared blankly on the shore. This sonic communication device was also found in the backpacks of the mercenaries. They knew in advance that the mission would require diving, and were much more prepared than Kaylan and the others. Well, continue diving and pay attention to the surrounding environment, Kaylan said. The water flow is normal, and there are no abnormal sound sources approaching. I only heard the sound of the propeller blades, Akira Asano said on the communication channel. Now, he is like a humanoid living sonar, and every move within a range of tens of meters is detected. There was no way to escape his ears. In order to improve the monitoring accuracy as much as possible, Asano Akira didn't even wear a diving suit. The entire upper body was naked, and the scuba only chose a half-covered style. Kaylan stared closely at the mechanical depth gauge in his hand. The dial of the depth gauge was coated with fluorescent coating, emitting a faint light in the dark environment. The slender metal pointer was moving little by little, which meant their diving depth is constantly increasing. 20 meters, 25 meters. 30 meters, 35 meters. Finally, when the pointer was about to point to 39 meters, Layton's voice came from the earphones. We found the stone door that Guy mentioned, but the stone door is open. Understood, you are on standby at the Shimin location. Asano Akira and I will be there soon. After K-Lan finished speaking, he accelerated his dive speed, and within a short while, he was already next to Layton. A stone door more than 3 meters high suddenly appeared on the rock wall. The two doors opened inward and were close to the two walls of the passage. There were several extremely obvious scratch marks on the inside of the passage. K-Lan glanced at the depth gauge again. It was exactly 50 meters. K-Lan, there is writing on this door, it seems to be alpha writing. Come and take a look. What is it? Layton put his hands on the door on the right and shouted in a low voice. K-Lan went over to take a look and saw that it was indeed a string of alpha characters. Although the stone door was severely eroded due to being soaked in salt water for a long time, he could still barely make out the shape of these characters. What does this mean? Layton couldn't help but ask again. This is a series of serial numbers. K-Lan said, with a hint of doubt in his words, just like the numbers composed of numbers or letters in human language, they have no specific meaning and their only function is to sort. Sorting? Numbering? Layton was stunned. Does that mean there is more than one stone gate and passage like this? It's hard to say, but now we don't have time to look for other stone gates. K-Lan took out a harpoon gun from behind and held it in his hand. He nodded to Layton and Asano Akira, let's go, hold on tight. Time. Yes, Layton was still the vanguard. With a slight turn of the propeller, he floated into the passage. K-Lan and Asano Akira followed immediately. The three of them walked less than 20 meters before Layton stopped again. There is also alpha text here, he said, the left side, the right side, and the top and bottom. The amount of text is quite large. This time, it won't just be a series of numbers, right? Just as he said, from here on, a large number of alpha characters began to appear in the passage, and even the floor under his feet was paved with stone slabs engraved with characters. But K-Lan only glanced at it, but a strong sense of vigilance still arose in his heart. He quickly turned his head away and said to Layton, don't look at those characters. What do these words mean? Why can't I read them? Besides, I can't understand them even if I read them. Layton said with some confusion, but he still listened to K-Ian's words and turned his eyes away from those words. The text moved away. It's difficult for me to translate the meaning of these words to you in human language, but I can tell you their function. Just now, I just tried to understand the meaning of these words, and a wave of emotions came into my brain. Irresistible sleepiness, there is something wrong with these words themselves. I suspect that the mercenaries' trance of consciousness must have something to do with them. They must be staring at these words because they are curious. K-Lan continued, whether they can understand these words or not, these words will have some effect on the people who look at them. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 292. I always feel a little scared when you say that. Layton muttered in a low voice, is this alpha civilization really so scary? Will you fall into a trance just by looking at some characters? I don't know, the technological development level of alpha civilization is still a mystery, K-Lan replied, but I think there are some things that may not come from alpha civilization itself. If nothing else, let's just say that the holy word is like a magic curse. Its principles and functions have completely subverted all known physical rules. This is similar to the miracles in the religious classics of the old era. If it weren't for if Lan had experienced it personally, he would never believe such a thing. Even with the technological level of alpha civilization, it would be difficult to give a reasonable explanation for this, the sight that swept over him, the majestic sense of oppression, and the indescribable feeling, fear. K-Lan doesn't think alpha civilization has such an ability. It definitely comes from a higher level creature. That is what alpha people call God. It is difficult for K-Lan to imagine what kind of existence this is. Maybe he is the universe itself, or maybe he is an observer independent of this dimension. He looks at the civilizations in this universe, Just like human beings, it's the same as watching a bacterial community multiply in a petri dish. You said it's the God that the Alpha people believe in? I remember that the true God that the heretic sects always talk about is the same thing, right? Does this God really exist? Layton asked. Exists. But God is just a proxy name. This should be just a creature that is so powerful that we can hardly imagine it. It cannot be confused with the omnipotent supernatural body in religious concepts. Of course, from our perspective, it's pretty much omnipotent. Isn't that the same as a god? In the old era, Shintoism believed in Amaterasu, Buddhism believed in Sakyamuni, and Christianity believed in Jehovah, but in my opinion, if the God believed by the Alpha people really exists, it is not. Are they much more powerful than these gods that humans believe in? If you think gods in religious concepts are weak, that's just because the vision of the people who created these gods has been limited by the times and technological levels. For example, do you think you are a god? Kaylan said. Are you kidding? I'm just an ordinary person. What's the point of comparing you to me? Layton couldn't help but smile and said, did you stay up late reading novels about cultivating immortals before setting off? But in the eyes of a group of ants, you are a god. Kaylan still maintained a serious tone. Ants can't understand human behavior, just like we can't understand the existence of gods. Suppose one day, you are at your job. I saw a swarm of ants in the room. The ants climbed onto your table and formed several strange shapes. What would you do? Well, if there really are such ants, I would probably be a little curious and see what they do next. Then what if the shapes of these ants are human words, and the content of the words is to pray for food? How would you respond? Then, it depends on my mood. If I'm in a good mood, I might give them some biscuit crumbs. If I'm in a bad mood, let alone food, I'll probably slap all these ants to death. At this point, Layton was stunned. So, it seems like that's really what happened. Anyway, both options are just a piece of cake for you, but for the ants, the former is a gift prayed for through a ritual, while the latter is a punishment from heaven for offending the gods. Their essence is both. It's the same. Kaylan said, I am an atheist. In my opinion, the so-called gods are actually just existences that are so powerful that lower civilizations cannot understand them. But no matter what this god is, it looks at us like ants. Oh, maybe even worse than ants. Layton said, when I think about this, I feel a deep sense of powerlessness. Just the things left on this alpha star are already beyond the reach of humans. When I think about the existence of alpha civilization that even they have to worship, I feel that we are too insignificant. You said, will this god accidentally sneeze one day and destroy the entire alpha star? Who knows, maybe this world will be destroyed in the next second. Then I don't have to worry about whether we will be trapped in this ruins. Kaylan said, why are you turning around to look again? What's on the wall? Didn't I tell you not to look at the words? Just stare straight ahead. Alas. Layton sighed dejectedly, the more you say you can't read it, the more I can't help but care about it. There are these words carved on both sides of the passage, above and below. If I'm not careful, I will. If I catch a glimpse of them, there's nothing I can do about it. Kaylan thought for a moment and said, how about this? Change the position and let Asano Akira take the vanguard position. You follow him, turn off the lights, and just stare at Asano Akira's back. If that doesn't work, just put your hands on his shoulders and close your eyes completely. That's okay. Layton nodded, closed his eyes, turned sideways, and let Asano Akira come to the front. Perhaps because of the influence of the writing on the wall, the mercenary described that they spent a long time in this passage, but in fact, the actual length of this passage is only more than 100 meters, and there is a rather steep slope. Going up this steep slope, Kaylan and the other three quickly emerged from the water. The last part of the passage is indeed a set of stone steps. The mercenary was right about this. The height difference between each step of these stone steps is nearly 1 meter. It is obviously not built for the human body. Kaylan and the others could not climb up the steps like normal stairs. They had to use their hands and feet to climb up bit by bit. After climbing a full 103 steps, they finally entered the funnel-shaped cave. A total of 103 levels, the height from the water is 96.46 meters. No radiation dose exceeding the dangerous value has been detected in the environment, and the temperature is basically the same as the outside. Layton thought silently, these data maybe they would not be used in the following actions, but Layton still recorded them one by one. This is a habit that a professional relic hunter must develop. This cave is indeed very big, Kaylan said. Just as he had judged in advance, the cave was dry at the moment, there was no water at the bottom, and there was no such pale pink flesh. The location they came out of was almost halfway up the slope. At the bottom of the cave, there was a circular stone platform about 50 meters in diameter, with an empty base fixed in the middle of the stone platform. Kaylan did not focus all his attention on the stone platform, but paid more attention to the surroundings and top of the cave. The most valuable thing in the cave is undoubtedly the jar, and that jar has been hired. The soldiers took it away. Although Kaylan was a little curious about the contents of the jar, his main purpose was to find a way out of the ruins. There are also a large number of stalactites hanging from the top of this cave. Under the guidance of the flashlight beam, Ian's sight swept through the gaps between each bamboo-shaped stone pillar. He could only see black or gray-white rocks. Even though this cave was dug by the Alpha people, there are no traces of human processing at all in the structure of the cave itself. Except for the lowest stone platform. Asano, can you hear the sound of the wind? It's the sound of air flowing through cracks in rocks or small holes, Kaylan asked Asano Akira. Akira Asano shook his head and said, it's very quiet here, and very dry. Not only was there no sound of wind, but there was also no sound of water. Although this was a cave, the humidity was very low. The stalactites hanging on the top of the cave had long stopped growing, and there were no water droplets that dissolved a large amount of mineral salts from them. Dripping from the tip. Yeah, it's too dry here. Layton squatted down and covered the ground with his normal palm. There is almost no moisture in these sandstones. I even suspected that the guy told lies. If this cave was really almost filled, even if the tide has receded, these rocks should still be moist, and they will not be able to recover to such a dry level in a short period of time. It's possible that what he saw was an illusion, Kaylan pondered. It's also possible that it really dried up. It is impossible for water to evaporate so quickly in a closed environment, not to mention, the humidity in the air is wrong, Layton said. Standing water can be drained by drainage devices, and humidity can also be adjusted by ventilation systems, but whether it is drainage or ventilation, there must be a pipeline leading to the outside world. As long as we can find this pipeline, we will have a chance to get out of here. Kaylan carefully walked down the slope, then jumped onto the platform. He remembered that the mercenary said that water gushes out from the base, so there must be a pipe connecting the outside to the base. Kaylan carefully observed the base in front of him. The base is a flat circular cone with a trapezoidal cross-section. The whole body shows a purple-red color similar to pure copper. However, Ian's alloy dagger could not leave any trace on it. It can be seen that this metal material is definitely not pure copper. Its hardness is much higher than that of pure copper. Layton, can you tell what kind of material this is? Kaylan called over Layton, who was studying the stone platform. Layton was still better than Kaylan in materials science. Isn't this just copper? It seems to be quite pure. Layton glanced at it and immediately came to a conclusion. Can you take a closer look? What else could it be if it wasn't copper? A probe protruded from Layton's robotic arm. When the tip of the probe touched the base, it was bent directly, and there was still no trace left on the base. Leave no trace. Hey, it's really not copper. The hardness of this thing is okay, but I don't know how flexible it is. If the physical properties are excellent, it might be a substitute for nano alloy, but I don't know if the formula is complicated or not. Can human craftsmanship produce? As soon as he mentioned this, Leighton became excited instantly. He once again took out the circular saw made of nano-alloy, slightly ground off some metal powder from the base, and then pointed the welding gun at the powder. Flame reaction can be used to test the presence of some metals and compounds, and is a very commonly used test method in chemical laboratories. The flame from the welding gun swept over the metal powder. Kaylan noticed that a flash of green flashed inside the flame. Although it was only for a moment, both he and Leighton captured this change. Only green does contain copper elements. Leighton frowned, but none of the known copper alloys have such strength. Moreover, if it is a copper alloy, it should not appear as pure copper. Color, I'm a little confused. Don't think about it yet, Kaylan interrupted Leighton's soliloquy. Can you find a way to cut this base open? That guy said that water gushes out from the base, so what should be inside? There is a pipeline connected to the outside world. Leighton tapped the shell of the base with his mechanical finger, and suddenly a dull sound came. This shell is very thick, at least 7 or 8 centimeters, and it cannot be cut with a welding gun or a circular saw. Leighton stretched out the circular saw, and Kaylan saw that there were very obvious signs of wear on the teeth of the circular saw, and the rotating shaft in the middle was also slightly deformed. Just to remove the metal powder, the circular saw was only in contact with the base shell for a few seconds, and it was damaged to this extent. If it continued to cut, the entire saw would probably be scrapped. As for the welding torch, even if all the fuel they carry is put into it, it will only be a drop in the bucket. Leighton, are you carrying an endoscope? Kaylan asked. This is a sophisticated detection equipment that is widely used in medicine and industry. There are many finger-thickness parts on the surface of this base. Holes. If a pair of endoscopes can be inserted through these holes, the internal structure of the base can also be explored. However, Leighton shook his head, that thing is usually only used when inspecting precision components. Nowadays, the equipment is modular. Whether it is repair or replacement, the entire module is operated. You can't use that kind of sophisticated testing equipment at all. In other words, even if you can use an endoscope to detect internal faults in parts, there is absolutely no way to repair them in actual combat situations, so I will never bring this thing. On the body. The smallest detection equipment on Leighton's body is the camera that was used as a periscope before, but this camera cannot fit into such a small hole. I also left my pair of medical endoscopes at home. Just like you, endoscopes are not needed for emergency surgeries, and surgeries that require endoscopes cannot be performed under emergency conditions. Kaylan sighed. In this case, we can only try some local methods. The so-called homespun method is to put a few pieces of fingernail-sized lenses on the iron wire with glue, then put the iron wire into the small hole, use a flashlight to illuminate it, and use the reflection between the lenses to peek inside the base. Case. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 293. Leighton only glanced at it and couldn't help but exclaimed, "Oh! What a guy! Isn't the internal structure of this thing too delicate? Many transmission rods are only as thick as a hair. Thanks to this kind of alloy the strength is high enough. If a different material were used, this thing would be completely scrapped after being started once." Then can you see the function of these mechanical parts? Kaylan asked. It's too difficult. This thing is many times more precise than the differential engine. It can't be analyzed with the naked eye alone. It has to be scanned with a computer. Moreover, I don't know if there are any embedded components inside these mechanical parts. The crystal circuit structure, if any, is even more complicated. Leighton smacked his lips and said, "Moreover, I can guarantee that this kind of precision equipment is 100% equipped with anti-theft measures. If it is forcibly disassembled, it will be easy to commit suicide. Destroy, at worst. I don't know what will happen at worst, but it's good that nothing good will happen anyway. Leighton studied for a while and then decisively chose to give up. Even if this thing was dismantled and transported to the research institute, experts who had been immersed in mechanical engineering for most of their lives wanted to understand the principles of this thing. Toru, I'm afraid it will take several days. Can you find the metal rod that the exiles stuffed in? It should be something like a key. If there is that thing, it should be able to activate the mechanism of the space, Kaylan said. No. I was also looking for the metal rods that the mercenary mentioned, but I couldn't find them at all. Leighton shook his head and said, either those metal rods have been swallowed, or the mercenary remembered wrong. But we didn't find any of these things on the exiles, Kaylan said with some disappointment. Now the clues were in front of them, but the problem was that they were helpless with this clue. It was like facing a handle. A turtle with its head and limbs retracted into its shell is helpless. Put this away first and check other places, Kaylan said. He quickly walked to the edge of the stone platform, first illuminated the surrounding ditch with a flashlight, and then climbed over it lightly. According to the mercenary's description, the pale pink flesh that is suspected of being soil came up from under the stone platform. So in addition to the base, the stone platform itself must also have hidden mysteries. With a click sound, the hard rubber boot sole stepped on the bottom of the ditch outside the stone platform, but before Kaylan could bend down to check, he felt something wrapped around the instep of his feet. Through the boots and socks, Kaylan could feel that the thing was as tough as rubber, and it wrapped around his ankle with neither looseness nor tightness. However, the thing did not make any aggressive moves. It just rubbed against Kaylan's boots, like a well-behaved and docile puppy. Kaylan slowly pointed the flashlight in his hand at his feet, and saw that the bottom of the ditch was covered with that kind of pale pink flesh in less than a second, and a tentacle-like limb extended from the flesh. Like some kind of mollusk, wrapped around his boots several times. Leighton, who was following Kaylan but had not yet come down from the stone platform, had also seen this scene. There was a nervous look on his face, and he subconsciously picked up the gun in his hand. But at this moment, Kaylan raised his hand, stopped Leighton's movement, and then shook his head at him. Bullets are useless against this thing, and this thing doesn't seem to show any hostility. Damn. Damn. What should I do now? Kaylan, tell me, what can I do to help you? Although his words were full of anxiety, he had to keep his voice very low, for fear of disturbing those pink meats. Just stand there, don't move yet, Kaylan said to him, and then he turned to Asano. Akira, Asano, can you find my position now? Yes, Akira. Asano nodded while holding the sword. As long as you make a sound, I can find you. Okay, let me tell you about my plan in general. Kaylan said quickly, I plan to try the method the mercenary said and feed these things with blood, but I don't know how. Is this information provided by a mercenary true or false? If something unexpected happens later, I will try to jump up. Leighton, you have to find a way to catch me. Then, Asano, you are responsible for cutting off what is chasing me. If they catch up. As Kaylan said this, he slowly leaned down and took off the shoelaces from the quick buckles on the top of the boots. Is this really okay? Are you not afraid that the mercenary is lying to us? Leighton said with a worried look. So didn't I ask you to prepare second-hand? Kaylan glanced at him and said. But it's too risky. Actually, I think that guy didn't lie to us. It's been a minute now, but this thing still doesn't have any aggressive behavior, and it doesn't even continue to go up my legs. This shows that it has something to do with the characteristics of 11 soil are completely different, Kaylan said. Okay, I'm going to prepare to bleed. If there is any abnormal movement in it, I will break free from my boots and jump up, and then my life will be in your hands. I will catch you. Leighton gritted his teeth and nodded to Kaylan. Kaylan took a deep breath, lifted up his sleeves, took out a dagger from his waist, and made a shallow cut on his arm. Suddenly, a drop of blood seeped out from the incision, slid down the skin, and finally landed on the pink flesh at Ian's feet. Lan and Leighton both held their breaths and stared at the blood bead with their eyes wide open, while Asano Akira had already pushed the sword half an inch out of the sheath with his thumb. After coming into contact with this drop of blood, a small opening opened on the surface of the meat paste, and the blood droplet was swallowed in. Then, the meat paste at Ian's feet slowly started to squirm, and several clusters of granules emerged from it. The flesh sprouts grew out, and these sprouts quickly expanded and elongated into slender tentacles. These tentacles surrounded Ian's boots, but they did not launch an attack. They just swayed gently and touched the boots from time to time. On the surface, he looked very curious. No. Rather than being curious, Lan felt, these tentacles seemed to be acting like a baby. Leighton was completely stunned. He didn't know if the situation was considered an accident, as Lan said. He stretched out the mechanical arm, but it froze in mid-air. He didn't know whether he should move the lower part. Lan lifted him up. "What's wrong?" Akira Asano asked softly. He couldn't see the scene below and could only rely on his voice to deduce, there seems to be a lot more subtle noises. Lan, how are you? "SHH, don't act rashly yet, I'm not in danger, not at the moment," Lan said. "I think, it probably wants more blood." He raised his arm, pinched his arm with his other hand, and squeezed out a few drops of blood from the incision. These few drops of blood fell down and were quickly swallowed by the meat. At this time, those tentacles seemed to have gained great satisfaction, squirming soothingly. This made Lan couldn't help but think of those large amounts of blood. After inhaling the incense of Menzeo, the way people close their eyes and shake their heads is very similar to these tentacles. After almost 5 or 6 minutes, the tentacles wrapped around Ian's ankles reluctantly let go of him and retracted into the fleshy body. The fleshy flesh spread on the ground also quickly retracted. "Gather. I think, it should be fine." "That guy didn't lie to us," Lan said, taking out a bandage from his pocket and wrapping it around his wound. Leighton exhaled heavily the turbid breath he had been holding for a long time, and raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Asano Akira's tight body also relaxed, and with a pop sound, he pulled out the small blade of the blade was also returned to the sheath. "Are you coming up?" Leighton stretched out his hand to pull Lan to the stone platform, but the latter waved his hand towards him. "Wait a minute." After saying that, Lan walked towards the pool of shrunken flesh, which made Leighton couldn't help but become nervous again. "Hey, Lan, what are you going to do? You just got out of danger, don't go any more provoke this thing." "I just want to see where they came from," Lan replied. The pink flesh scattered at the bottom of the ditch squirmed and gathered together. It gradually transformed into a python-like creature, and its movement became like a snake, dragging on the ground. Lan chased after this meat python and walked half a circle around the stone platform. Only then did he discover that at the bottom of the stone platform, close to the bottom of the ditch, there was a cave with a diameter of half a meter. Lan watched helplessly as the meat python got into the cave and disappeared from sight. "There is actually a cave entrance here," Leighton whispered. "This location and angle are really hidden. If you stand on the stone platform, the hole is in the blind spot of the viewing angle. If you stand on the opposite side of the stone platform, the projection of the stone platform will be invisible. The shadow coming down will just cover the entrance of the hole. Unless the light is pointed directly at the entrance of the hole, it will be easily ignored by people." Obviously, those mercenaries did not discover the entrance of the cave, they only had eyes for the jar that was the mission target, and they had no intention of carefully examining the cave. But Lan knew in her heart that there must be a passage underground, otherwise it would be impossible for these pink fleshy mud to appear and disappear out of thin air, unless it could seep directly from the ground. Lan squatted in front of the cave entrance, gestured with the size of the cave entrance with his palm, and then began to take off his equipment. "Wait a minute, are you planning to get in?" Layton said in shock. "Otherwise. Did you bring a remote control robot?" Kaylan asked back. At this time, he had taken off his equipment belt and cold-proof jacket, leaving only his underwear and a fleece jacket with a little cold protection effect. But, did that thing get in just now?" "But that thing didn't show hostility towards me, did it?" Kaylan tore off a few pieces of heating patches called warm babies and stuck them inside the fleece jacket. However, despite this, he was forced to. The coldness of the person is still creeping into the thin clothes. The temperature here is still too low, Kaylan thought to himself. In this case, his body temperature cannot be maintained for long. If it takes too long, he will still die from hypothermia even if no accidents happen. 15 minutes, if nothing is found, I will return in 15 minutes, Kaylan said, including the time required to turn back, half an hour, which is almost the limit of his body. P.S. Let me tell you about rewards and VIP groups because I use a computer to write code here, and I don't usually look at the background of my mobile phone. Then there will be delays and omissions in the reward information in the background of my mobile phone, so I have never published a single chapter to thank the readers who gave me rewards, and I still feel very sad. But no matter what, whether it is subscribing or tipping, it is everyone's support for me and this book, and I am very grateful. But I hope that everyone can consume rationally. It is not easy to make money. I will be very happy if you can support the genuine version and subscribe to paid chapters for me. If you are a student or a working class person with a modest income, don't give it to me. Rewarded. If you really want to support, just vote for the free recommendation vote every day and the monthly ticket. Of course, if those readers who are well off are willing to support me with money, then I can only say, please join me. Great strength. Regardless of whether you are a genuine or pirated reader, you can join the book club group if you are interested. The group number is 667413621. This group is an ordinary group. As for the VIP group, it should be created after the book reaches 1 million words. Because there are currently no bonus chapters that can be given to full subscription readers, I will write some extra plots when I have free time later. Of course, the bonus chapters may not necessarily be I will write some short stories under the same worldview. Things like this, such as the plot of The Hound before he retired, the plot of Akira Asano joining the experimental unit, the survival process of an unknown exile in the wilderness, etc., including customized characters and related short stories for loyal readers with high fan value, and in subsequent plots, these extra characters will also have a high chance of joining the main plot. The specific situation will be explained in detail in the group at that time. Finally, one last thing to mention, if you are an iOS user, just subscribe. Do not tip, especially using an iOS app, because Apple will take 1/3 of the iOS channel. And then peel it off layer by layer. The author can only get 1/10 of the money you rewarded, and it will be delayed for 3 months. I can only say that the face of monopoly capital is really disgusting, but I have no choice but not to give them money. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 295. However, just in case, Kaylan still made second-hand preparations. He folded the cold-proof clothes into a ball and tied them to his ankles with ropes, although in the narrow cave in front of him, he could not. The heavy cold-proof clothing was worn on the body, but if the passage behind suddenly became wider, this cold-proof clothing dragged behind the feet would come in handy. Be careful. If anything goes wrong, come back quickly, Layton said worriedly. I always feel dash. Stop. Hearing Layton's crow's mouth start to speak again, Kaylan quickly stopped him. Just wait here for me. If I don't come back within 15 minutes, it means I made a special discovery inside. If I'm not back within 2 hours, don't wait any longer. After saying that, Kaylan bit the flashlight in his mouth, lay down, and crawled into the cave on his hands and feet. The inner wall of the cave was very smooth, as if it had been carefully polished with polishing paste. This made Kaylan quite laborious when crawling. His elbows on the ground would slip from time to time. It took him a minute to crawl. It only crawled less than 10 meters. The only good thing is that the air quality in the cave is pretty good, the oxygen content is not low, no toxic and harmful gases have been detected, and there is no particularly unpleasant smell, only a faint earthy smell permeates it. Could this cave be that thing's lair, Kaylan thought to himself, but at this time, he had completely lost the trace of the pink meat paste. Fortunately, there was only one passage in this cave and there were no branches, so it was no need to worry about losing track. Noisy current sounds continued to come from the earphones. Kaylan tried to call the team channel twice using a short-distance radio, but did not get any response. Obviously, there is a strong interference field in this cave. Even if they brought the survey robot cannot be controlled remotely using radio. After crawling for nearly 100 meters, the inside of the cave actually became wider. The diameter of the cave instantly changed from less than half a meter to more than 2 meters, and the cave walls were no longer as smooth as before and became rough. Sand and gravel material. Although it was still cramped, at least Kaylan could put on the cold-proof clothing and stand up. The risk of hypothermia was eliminated instantly. Moreover, walking consumes much less energy than crawling. Kaylan turned back to look at the small cave. He noticed that there was a circle of sandstone around the entrance of the cave that had a glass-like texture. He originally thought that the inner wall of the cave would become so smooth because meat often entered it. It was because of crawling, but now it seems that it is not the reason. The rock formations around the inside of the cave at the front have undergone a vitrified transformation, which means that the cave did not exist originally and was later burned by something with extremely high temperature. To vitrify rock, the temperature must be at least around 2000 degrees. In terms of human technology, it is not difficult to obtain this temperature. What is difficult is how to precisely control such a high-temperature object to allow it to melt in the rock mass. Drilling a hole more than 100 meters deep with almost the same diameter from front to back can be done without damaging the structure of the rock mass itself. As far as Kaylan knows, apart from the Research Institute, there is absolutely no engineering company on the Ark that can do this. No more than 5. But if it were the Alpha civilization, this kind of thing wouldn't be worth making a fuss about. At this moment, a burst of noisy gunshots suddenly echoed in the cave. Ian's first reaction was to lie down immediately, but he soon realized that these gunshots were not real, just like the sounds he heard in the abyss of the sea, they all came from his mind. Illusion among them. Gunshots? Why are there gunshots here? Kaylan got up from the ground with some confusion. Over the years, the ruin hunters on the Ark have indeed unearthed individual weapons of Alpha civilization in ruins everywhere, but the problem lies in the individual weapons of Alpha civilization. Most of the weapons are energy weapons, and the few that use physical ammunition are also kinetic energy weapons, and the gunshots are clearly made by firearms that use gunpowder. Kaylan can even distinguish the Type 01 assault rifle and some the distinctive gunshot sound of older models of firearms. This is not the first time he has heard this kind of hallucination, but when this kind of hallucination appeared in the past, it was always some information related to Alpha civilization, and there was never anything related to the alien species of humans. This is the first time. Strange, if we are still in the dream world, this kind of thing is not difficult to understand. Kaylan said to himself, and why can I hear gunshots here? Is it because of some special needs? Triggering conditions? Or, are the gunshots of those mercenaries from before being preserved by this cave for some reason? Kaylan read a story on the internet, saying that in a certain valley on the earth, whenever there is thunder and rain, the valley will echo with the sound of horses neighing and weapons clashing, as if two people are fighting. It was as if a ghost army were fighting in the valley. Residents living near the valley were frightened by this. They called this phenomenon the passing of ghost soldiers. This rumor became more and more bizarre as it spread, even attracting many experts and researchers. All led to this place. After expert surveys and inspections, the source of the sound was basically determined. First, because there are a large number of weathered rocks in the valley, the whistling sound of high-speed airflow passing through the rock pores was mistakenly heard as the neighing of war horses. Sound. Secondly, the rock structure in the valley is mainly composed of quartz ore and magnetite, coupled with the static electricity generated during thunderstorms, turning the valley into a huge recorder, recording all kinds of noisy sounds. The effect of this kind of recording using minerals and lightning is naturally incomparable with that of a real tape recorder. There will be serious distortion, and the distorted sound will sound even weirder. On the contrary, it is in line with people's feelings about ancient battlefields and the undead. Military assumptions. Does this cave also have a similar recording function? As for the source of the sound, the mercenary also mentioned that when they faced the fleshy mud that suddenly emerged from the deep trench, they poured out a large amount of ammunition. Those deafening gunfire echoed continuously in the cave. It must have been in the cave. At that time, it was recorded by this cave. Kaylan continued to walk inside the cave. Not far away, there was an almost 90-degree right-angle turn in the cave. After turning this corner, an empty underground square came into Ian's field of vision. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 296. The square is paved with flat hexagonal metal floor tiles, and the gaps between each floor tile are glowing with a faint white fluorescence. From Ian's position, it looks like a giant honeycomb made of some kind of luminous material. The grid is filled with a sense of unreality. In Ian's subconscious, there was always a voice telling him, this is the real core area of the A-087 glacier ruins, and the location of the sarcophagus they discovered before is only located on the upper level of the ruins. It's just a doubtful grave. Fortunately, Kaylan and the others did not conduct a further exploration of that place at that time, otherwise, it might be their turn to be buried by the collapsed ruins. The bottomless sinkhole that appeared after the glacier collapsed is actually part of the original glacier ruins. This is not a twin ruins at all, but a super large giant ruins. Kaylan took a step forward and stepped on a hexagonal metal floor tile. Suddenly, the circle of white fluorescence around the floor tile rose up. After circling Ian's body, it then falling back to the ground again. A voice speaking Al-French sounded in his mind, identity verification completed, welcome back. Come back, Kaylan was slightly stunned, but before he could think further, all the white fluorescent lights on the ground were extinguished. The next second, directly above the square, a dazzling star suddenly lit up in the sky. A white light ball, this luminous ball projects light into every corner of the square, reflecting the sky and the earth like daylight. Only then did Kaylan see clearly that in the center of the square, there was a huge statue more than 10 meters high, made of something like gold but not gold, and something like stone but not stone. This statue was very similar to a human being. It had a human-like torso and limbs. There are even lifelike muscle lines and body joints. There is even an organ between the legs that seems to be a promotion device, but it only has no neck and head. This guy, why does the more he looks at it, the more he looks like the Scientian in ancient mythology? Kaylan muttered quietly, and when he moved his eyes away from the Scientian statue, he suddenly discovered that there was a slight trace on the statue's feet. There were actually more than a dozen human remains scattered around. Kaylan immediately ran towards the feet of the statue. He was absolutely unmistakable. They were human skeletons. Although these bones had been severely damaged and almost none of them were intact, as a person who had memorized introductory textbooks on modern medicine, Kaylan can still tell the names of these bones and their corresponding parts on the human body at a glance. Kaylan counted the number of skulls, and there were 17 in total. In other words, at least 17 people died here. Are they the mercenaries who came to get the cans? That guy wasn't telling the truth. In fact, there were more than 30 people in their team, and most of them were lost here. Kaylan picked up a broken radius bone. The owner of this bone had obviously been dead for a long time. If it was really those mercenaries, the body should not have completely decomposed at this time. Generally speaking, even if the flesh and blood of a corpse has been eaten clean by some kind of scavenger, it will take several years for microorganisms to completely decompose the organic matter in the bones, and the piece in Ian's hand, the radius bone, was as white as marble, and the broken section was full of holes. There was obviously no organic matter in it. Even some of the bones have a subfossil-like texture. But Kaylan couldn't rule out that the special conditions in the ruins caused this to happen. Those red flesh worms on Leviathan can eat people without even leaving bones in the blink of an eye. So if there is someone, it doesn't seem unusual to grow something that can absorb all the organic matter in a corpse in just a few days. Kaylan even suspected that these corpses were eaten by the pink flesh. It's just, why doesn't the pink flesh attack me? Moreover, why did I hear the voice of welcome back after entering this square? I have never been to this place. Is it because of that stone tablet? He absorbed the contents of that stone tablet, so it was equivalent to obtaining the key to this ruins. Could it be possible that he accidentally became the owner of this ruins? Although this guess sounds outrageous, it seems that this is the only way to explain it. This is really a bit too fantasy. Kaylan rubbed his forehead speechlessly. He simply ignored these things and bent down to search among the bones. As long as the relics of these deceased people can be found, the identities of these deceased people can be easily determined. All the clothes and personal belongings on these remains were gone. Kaylan only found a rusty pistol. In the trigger ring of the pistol, there was a small piece of the middle phalanx of the index finger. Colt M1911, Kaylan recognized the model of this pistol at once. This was a famous single-action semi-automatic pistol in the old era. Even today, more than 1,000 years later, there are still many imitation versions are circulating in the arms market. I didn't expect that there are fans of retro firearms among this group of mercenaries. Kaylan said to himself, but for some reason, this Colt M1911 always felt weird in his hand. No. The grip feels much thicker than the genuine M1911, and the muzzle is too small, right? This is definitely not a 0.45 caliber version. Thinking of this, Kaylan subconsciously pulled out the magazine of the pistol. What he didn't expect was that the reason why the grip of this gun was so thick was because it used a double-row side-by-side magazine, and the magazine, the bullet remaining inside, is also a type of bullet that Kaylan has only seen in the information. 6mm round-nose general-purpose pistol bullet. This is a pistol bullet that was developed in New Era 755. At that time, the Ark was still on an interstellar journey. In order to save precious metal materials, this mini-type pistol, the bomb, was developed. Because of its extremely weak lethality and the same caliber as toy gun bullets, it was nicknamed BB Bullet. But in the 9th year after Ark landed on Alpha Planet, that is, New Era 909, this bullet was abandoned and discontinued. All remaining ammunition was recycled, and firearms using this bullet were not transformed into other calibers. That is, dismantled and thrown into the furnace. The reason is simple: the power of the 6mm BB bullet is so weak that it is difficult to penetrate even soft body armor made of Kevlar, let alone the carbon fiber light armor that is now standard in the Army. When dealing with the indigenous creatures on planet Alpha, a gun using these bullets is really no different from a toy gun. This kind of bullet was originally created for security and anti-riot purposes, but after better alternatives became available, they withdrew from the stage of history and can only be seen in some weapons museums and the homes of gun collectors. And those mercenaries are even less likely to use this kind of gun as a weapon. Selling it to collectors can earn enough credits to buy several of the latest assault rifles. Kaylan was suddenly shocked. These people were not the mercenaries at all. and the time they came here was New Era 909 at the latest. They were at least 40 years earlier than the first explorers who discovered the remains of the A-087 glacier. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 297. Looking at these remains, Kaylan couldn't help but think of the 776 Special Forces team that disappeared 48 years ago. The years between the two are extremely close, and they both appeared inside the Alpha ruins that humans have never set foot on. More than 40 years ago, when Ark first landed on Alpha Planet, what happened? What is the purpose of the 776 Special Forces team and these people now? Even Lieutenant General Maginot bluntly said that he did not know the details, so who could know about them? Wait a minute. Kaylan suddenly felt something stir in his head, and the 5 characters Undead Crew Association instantly appeared. According to Maginot, the immortal crew has existed for hundreds of years, which means that before the Ark landed on planet Alpha, they had already controlled the highest authority on the Ark, as the holders of the highest authority. They must know the mission performed by the 776 Special Forces team and the current owners of these bones. However, 40 years ago, neither the undersea city nor the glacier ruins had been discovered by humans. The former was submerged under trillions of tons of seawater, while the latter was covered by snow-capped glaciers. At that time, most of the forces on the Ark were devoted to the battle to wipe out the indigenous creatures near the landing site. The intensity of exploration of the remains of the Alpha civilization was completely incomparable to what it is now. Even if they couldn't find it, it was even more difficult. Forget about sending people into the ruins. If I can meet the undead crew next time, maybe. Kaylan thought for a moment and gave up the idea in an instant. Since the mission record of the 776 Special Team has been deleted, it means that the undead crew doesn't want to let them others know of their existence. If you ask rashly, there is a high risk that you will be silenced directly. At least one of the words Maginot said to himself was true: never take the initiative to provoke people from the undead crew. These people can easily discard the entire East 9th District module, let alone one like himself. An insignificant little hunter. Perhaps, there is only one way to figure out these secrets, and that is, as that Hermaphroditus said, when the day comes when he becomes a member of the Undead Crew Society, these secrets will naturally be revealed. Will open up on its own. Kaylan believed that that guy was definitely more than just talking, but, in what capacity did he want to join the Undead Crew? As a living CPU. Abandon the physical body, retain only the brain, and then insert hundreds of electrodes and various catheters into the cerebral cortex? Judging from the current level of technology, such a brain in a vat can indeed be preserved for hundreds of years. It can almost be said to be immortal, but just thinking about this appearance is enough to make Kaylan shudder. Already. Could it be that the cost and body of this group of undead crew are all this kind of thing? Combined with the fact that they can remotely control Victoria's cyborg body through cables, maybe, this is really the case. Just when Kaylan was thinking wildly, the voice from before sounded in his mind again, instantly pulling him back to reality. Prepare to initiate handover procedures. The test subject with serial number 153 has been activated. Behavior pattern modified to the third set of default plans. The first phase of the trial begins. Countdown, 5. The pink flesh python appeared from behind the statue. It went around the waist of the statue, slowly slid to the statue's right knee, and then, with a snap, it fell to the ground. 4. Kaylan took a few steps back, staring at the meat python in front of him, and slowly drew out his pistol. 3. The meat python began to deform, and it returned to the pink flesh state again, and then wrapped itself around a skull on the ground. Countless differentiated tentacles penetrated through the large and small pores on the skull, filling, squeezing, and rolling against each other. The overwhelmed bones made a crisp sound, and fine cracks instantly covered the bone surface. But the skull did not burst open. The meat paste was like an adhesive, it crushed the skull into pieces, but firmly bonded the pieces together. Compared with its previous harmless appearance, at this moment, its body is filled with a suffocating sense of oppression, and those powerful tentacles clearly show its aggression. Ian's back gradually begins to seep out. Sweating, he smelled a smell called danger, which was like the fishy smell emitted by a huge sea monster in the bottomless abyss. It's scary, but there's no escape. 2. Those tentacles extended and began to pick up the bones scattered on the ground, and then piece these bones together one by one. 1. 5 seconds passed, and a strange human body appeared in front of Kaylan. It moved its limbs and walked towards Kaylan step by step. It has a human head, but no human facial features. Its face is flat, as if a layer of rubber has been laid on the facial bones. The eye sockets and nasal cavity are 3 empty black holes, without lips, and 2 rows of white. And the neat teeth were just exposed, like a mask of a skinned ghost on Halloween. Is this what the so-called trial is about? Kaylan took a deep breath and raised the gun. He first aimed at the opponent's head, but just when he was about to pull the trigger, he suddenly changed his mind and moved the crosshair to his knees. Although this thing has a human body shape, it is not a human being after all, and the head is naturally not a vital part. Instead of shooting the head, it would be more effective to break the joints to restrict its movement. Bang! The deafening gunfire of the large-caliber hunting pistol echoed in the hall. The 12.7 mm armor-piercing bullet directly shattered the humanoid monster's right leg and knee. The humanoid monster lost its support and immediately fell to the ground. But in the next moment, those tentacles shot out quickly, and they caught the bone fragments that were still flying in the air, leaving no trace behind. In the blink of an eye, the thing's right knee had returned to its original state. This thing can't be killed with bullets. Although Kaylan thought so, he still pulled the trigger repeatedly and poured out the remaining bullets in the magazine. Several large holes were opened in the body of the humanoid monster, and the kinetic energy attached to the bullet even pulled it back. The last shot that shattered the neck bone even overturned it to the ground, but when it stood up again, all the wounds on its body had been restored to their original state. The mercenary told the truth: bullets are useless against things. As for the human skeleton, it is just a skeleton. Even if it is ground into powder, it can restore every bone to its original state. This is like crushing the polymer material and throwing it into a material recycling machine, and then printing it out with a 3D printer. No, it's far faster than any printer on the market. The repairs have already begun before the damage is done. Physical means can't kill it. Kaylan thought as he took another step back, but a curtain of light rose behind him, blocking his retreat like an invisible wall of air. This was a closed venue made up of dozens of hexagonal floor tiles. It was a gladiatorial arena, and he and the humanoid monster he faced were the gladiators in this arena. The opponent is still 4 floor tiles away from me. This is a fight to the death, but the opponent is an immortal creature. The humanoid monster's right hand suddenly moved back, and countless tentacles as thick as hair swept toward the rear. They rolled up the fragmented bones, then crushed them into smaller pieces, and then spliced them together into sharp pieces. By the time these tentacles returned to its body, it already had a strangely shaped bone blade over 1 meter long in its hand. Does this mean hand-to-hand combat? Kaylan seemed to be mocking, but also forced out a strange smile as if helpless. I didn't expect that the level of science and technology of Alpha civilization, which has completely crushed mankind, would be the content of the trial. It's as primitive as the cold weapon era of the old era. But Kaylan also understands that this way of fighting is not only primitive, but also cruel. In the era of hot weapons, hand-to-hand combat rarely occurs in wars, but any army capable of hand-to-hand combat can definitely be counted. The best of the best. It's a pity, if I had known better, I wouldn't have been in a hurry to return Asano Akira's knife. K-Lan sighed, and at the same time took out the dagger and a finely polished stone cone from a submarine cave. Holding the stone all in his left hand, with his fist closed in front of his chest, and holding the dagger in his right hand, K-Lan assumed a standard close combat posture. The humanoid monster's knees and ankles began to bend, and streamlined muscle lines suddenly appeared in various parts of the body. These muscles began to contract and accumulate strength, starting from the spine and waist. The force was first exerted, then the thighs, calves, and all the way to the toes. Its soles kicked hard on the ground, and with the help of this strong reaction force, it accelerated violently, and in less than a breath, it had already rushed in front of K-Lan. It held the bone blade in both hands and stabbed diagonally forward with rapid force, heading straight for K-Ian's side of the body. However, the moment it started running, K-Lan had already used the ability to stop time to clearly see its charging direction and attack angle, and calculated its evasion route. K-Lan just took a just right step to the left. This viciously angled stab slid out against his coat, creating a nearly half-meter long gash in the tough fabric. K-Lan took this opportunity and swung the sharp blades of both hands downward at the same time, making two deep bone-visible incisions on the outside of the opponent's right arm. Laugh. Accompanied by a harsh sound, the wound made by the stone cone instantly became charred black, which was almost exactly the same as the change that occurred when the erosion seed came into contact with the stalagmite. The wound made by the other dagger, but there was no trace. Taking advantage of the momentum when the two sides were fighting hand-to-hand, K-Lan took a step away and once again put some distance between himself and his opponent. During this brief confrontation, he discovered two crucial things. One, the stone cone that is effective against the seed of corrosion is also effective against the guy. Although it will not show fear, there is no doubt that this thing can cause substantial damage to it, and the wound cannot be recovered immediately. 2. Although the body of the humanoid monster has movement abilities that are completely inconsistent with biological common sense, when fighting itself, it will imitate the principles of human muscle movement and pull the bones of the whole body through the contraction and relaxation of muscles. In this way, it can only display fighting skills that can only be used by humans, and K-Lan does not have to worry about being suddenly attacked by dozens of tentacles coming out of nowhere while fighting. This should be the restriction set by the trial procedure. From a certain perspective, Alpha civilization is still very martial. Without giving K-Lan much time to breathe, the humanoid monster launched another attack, but K-Lan used Chi-Ting's plug-in ability to see through the trick, and added a blackened wound on its lower back. Although this thing seems almost unsolvable, as long as we can obtain restraint weapons like stone cones, it is only a matter of time to solve it. Apart from its abnormal recovery ability, the combat ability of the humanoid monster itself does not exceed out of the category of ordinary humans. If Akira Asano were here, he would probably be able to kill him within 3 moves. Another staggered pass. This time, K-Lan simply gave up the dagger attack and used a stone awl to poke 2 bloody holes several centimeters deep in the opponent's hip. But at the same time, K-Lan also discovered something strange. Every time he launched an attack, the opponent's height and body shape would undergo some subtle changes, as if they were adjusting in a certain direction. Not only the body and the originally flat face have gradually become more three-dimensional. I don't know why, K-Lan always feels that this face is starting to look familiar. After the 6th round of confrontation, K-Lan finally recognized it. That face was clearly his own. It is gradually becoming itself. The attack methods of humanoid monsters have also undergone significant changes. There are less direct pokes and slashes and more predictions and sudden changes of moves. This makes K-Lan need to consider factors when choosing an evasive route. It's becoming more and more. It's imitating itself. It's learning itself. It is the same type of creature as the flesh centipede that Asano Akira fought with in the stone chamber. P.S. Little knowledge regarding the overhand and underhand grip of a dagger. In fact, ordinary people hold the dagger upside down, that is, the tip of the knife extends from the side of the little finger. Before holding it upright, the overhand grip has strong control and can exert powerful and quick force, highly lethal, and difficult to snatch the knife or grab the wrist, and the common holding posture in daily life, like holding a kitchen knife, with the tip of the knife sticking out from the thumb and the tiger's mouth side, is actually a reverse grip. The advantage of the underhand grip is that the attack distance is slightly longer than that of the overhand grip. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 298. K-Lan can still clearly remember that at that time, Asano Akira slashed the same point of his opponent's weapon with more than 100 swords, then broke the bone blade first, and then decapitated the head, successfully killing the flesh centipede. But K-Lan couldn't replicate that victory. Let's not talk about whether he could hit the same position 100 times with weapons. Just the bone blade in the opponent's hand had already caused a lot of damage. Variety. Like its body, this bone blade also has the ability to self-heal. In the previous fight, K-Lan watched helplessly as the sharp tip of the bone blade, as thin as a cicada's wing, shattered on the ground. But the next second, the bone blade had returned to its intact appearance. The tiny tentacles stuck between the fragments looked like string cheese. In just a moment, they would pull the bone blade fragments back into place and bond them tightly. The dagger in K-Ian's hand was not made of nino alloy. After many collisions and blocks, the blade had cracked and curled. The other one had a short blade polished with a stone awl. It is even lower than a dagger. When fighting against the bone blade in the opponent's hand that can be constantly repaired, I am afraid that K-Lan will be the one who kills people with the knife in the end. But, the information hidden in that battle was not the only one. The flesh centipede was also transformed from a similar piece of meat, but Akira Asano killed it by using the head-to-head method. This shows that the head is also its key point, and the humanoid monster in front of him. K-Lan realized that he might have entered a misunderstanding from the beginning. Since it has been imitating humans, not only the appearance and movement mechanism of humans, but also human weaknesses will also be imitated. To drive this body, it must first have a strong heart to pump blood, oxygen, and nutrients to every corner of the body. In addition, various human organs also need to coordinate with each other, and the most important organ of the human body, the brain, is naturally indispensable. Now that the biological technology of the Alpha civilization has become so powerful that it can be almost perfectly cloned using a piece of meat, no, the word copy is more accurate than cloning, it can be almost perfectly copied to an identical hound. So, if they want to set up an opponent that completely imitates humans in the trial, they shouldn't come up with a low-quality imitation that only looks good. In order to verify this, K-Lan chose the opponent's flank for his next attack, and sure enough, after the stone cone tore open the skin and deeper muscles, K-Lan caught a glimpse of an intestine-shaped organ deep in the wound, that the coiled mass should be the small intestine, and the thicker coil around the outside is the large intestine. Looking up, you can vaguely catch a glimpse of the corner of the stomach. As a price, K-Lan had the little finger and ring finger of his right hand cut off by the bone blade wielded by the opponent. The dagger fell to the ground with a clang. K-Lan endured the severe pain and used his thumb and index finger to take out a hemostatic bandage from his breast pocket, then bit open the seal with his teeth and quickly wrapped the injured hand stand up. This bandage was filled with hemostatic and analgesic drugs, and soon the unbearable pain gradually subsided. For K-Lan, the cost of these 2 fingers is worth it, since the opponent has even simulated this digestive organ that is of little use in battle, then other more important organs must have taken shape. The vital parts of the thing's body should be exactly the same as those of humans. As for why bullets can't kill it, that's because firearms are not within the scope allowed by the rules of this trial. All injuries caused by firearms are, in a sense, K-Ian's violation of the rules. Just like cheating in the exam, the points obtained by cheating will be recorded as invalid results, and the trauma caused by the bullet, even if it hits the vital part of the monster, will not have any effect. Not only the firearms, but also the alloy dagger produced in the human industrial assembly line in Ian's hand. They are weapons that are not allowed by the rules, and the only thing that can kill this thing is the stone awl. As long as Lan can pierce the monster's vital point with a stone cone, Lan can end this battle. Before this, Ian's first choice of attack targets were the joints that could restrict the opponent's movement, but now, he began to pay attention to those vital parts that could kill with a single blow. Brain, spine, throat, lungs, and heart. The humanoid monster was not in a hurry to launch an attack. As part of the rules, it also had physical limitations, not to mention that its body was now covered with wounds left by stone cones. It was panting heavily, dark and empty. His eyes were fixed on Lan, waiting for an opportunity to make a move. It became smarter, and the battle became more and more difficult for Lan. If he wanted to successfully damage it, he had to leave something behind. The price just now was 2 fingers, next time, maybe it's a whole arm. Lan picked up the dagger on the ground, put it back into its sheath, then bit the stone awl with his teeth, pulled out the pistol again, and replaced it with a full magazine. Some things cannot be imitated by imitation alone. This is the difference between humans and monsters, between intelligent creatures and beasts. Lan suddenly laughed. The rules can restrict me, but they can also be used to my advantage, he thought silently in his mind. The score for cheating will be counted as 0 points, but that refers to the idiot who was discovered by the invigilator. And I've never been caught. Lan held the gun with one hand, raised his leg back, kicked the pistol sleeve hard with the heel of his boot, and completed loading. Then, Lan started to accelerate and rush towards the humanoid monster. No matter how perfect the rules are, there are bound to be loopholes. At the moment when the two were about to collide, Lan pulled the trigger and fired 2 consecutive shots. 2 large-caliber projectiles broke the wrist of the monster's right hand, although the wrist recovered as before in the next second. But the opponent has missed the best opportunity to attack. Lan ran directly into the arms of the humanoid monster, slammed his head on its left shoulder, and stabbed the stone awl in his mouth into the monster's chest. Bang! Another shot hit the elbow joint of the monster's right hand, making it unable to turn the bone blade. At the same time, Lan threw his head to one side, driving the stone awl to tear open the monster's chest and ribs. A huge hole. A beating heart was exposed in front of Lan. The monster's broken elbow recovered, but it was too late. Lan dropped the gun, took the stone awl with his hand, and stabbed it into the heart.